Welcome back to the Mature Male podcast, where we explore the journey of authentic masculinity through timeless wisdom and practical guidance. I'm your host, Wes, a psychotherapist dedicated to helping men grow and thrive. Today, I'm joined by Mac, writer of the Substack newsletter, Porn Free Millennial. Mac is a digital nomad currently traveling while working remotely for an auto insurance company as a lead process designer. Through his writing and advocacy, has helped men break free from pornography addiction and reclaim their lives with greater authenticity and connection. Mac, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Wes, thanks for having me on. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
Yes, we're happy to have you. So let's start by discussing the nature of addiction and the psychology of pornography. Many men are introduced to porn at a young age and believe it doesn't impact them, but as they mature, they begin to recognize its repercussions. How does this progressive awareness develop, and why is it so difficult to recognize the impact when you're in the midst of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, at least from my personal experience, porn for me started at the age of 10, right? And I think when something starts that young, you don't quite have the awareness of the impacts, the consequences. I think that's one thing about addiction, right? Is it's something that we keep doing, oftentimes compulsively, where the consequences or the results are negative. They negatively affect us. They negatively affect people in our lives, negatively affect our trajectory as human beings with growth, right? With emotional intelligence and wisdom overall. And it keeps us stunted a little bit. So I think when it comes to awareness of it, unfortunately for me, and I think for a lot of people, the awareness comes oftentimes when we're caught with it. We're trying to hide it. Oftentimes, I think when I was a kid, that would be with my parents. That happened a few times when I wasn't sneaky enough, basically. But I didn't quite realize the full consequences of it, right? Because I wasn't in a relationship. I'm this teenager that's looking at this stuff all the time. And I didn't really fully realize it until I was going into marriage, until I was married, and how that affected my ex-wife now. And unfortunately, I went through a divorce. And a big part of that was because of just the hurt and the pain, the schisms that were caused because of my relationship with porn and how I wasn't quite fully developed maturity wise to handle it in a positive way, in a way that could heal the pain that was caused. So I often think the awareness comes, oftentimes, it's not for everybody, but I think oftentimes it comes when we hit some kind of rock bottom moment. We see the pain that it causes for somebody else. Or it could be, hey, if I'm really struggling to get into a relationship with someone, that could be it too, where you just have this moment, right, where it's a light bulb of like, wow, maybe I'm struggling to have intimacy with women or carry a conversation because I'm just looking at this stuff all the time. Anytime that I'm looking for some sort of release, some sort of escape, I go to porn. And that's when I look back at my life, and not just my past marriage, past relationships with women since I'd say eighth grade. It was always in the back. It was always there like a shadow. I always remember, I think when I was younger, I would just lose interest in women, in my girlfriend. I'd just get kind of bored. And oftentimes that was when I started looking at porn again. And I would just get bored and just be like, I don't need to be in a relationship right now, which is kind of wild to think about now that I'm 33. Just that young mind, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's sad. It's sad to look back at that I didn't fully experience the breadth of relationships and learn from them, because oftentimes I would just cut them off too short. Or there'd just be this breakup because, hey, you're not interacting with me in a healthy way. Yeah, I think the awareness oftentimes for men typically comes, I think, more out of a negative thing that happens to us, where we start to realize and identify what the consequences are of our hidden actions.
I agree with you. I think until you are forced to live the consequences fully and you are exposed, then why would you stop? And something I think about a lot, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. I'm also in my mid 30s. We were right on that edge of technology. I remember where you still had to use a college email for Facebook. And, but we just didn't have the same. I didn't at least have the same access to a computer. And certainly my phone was a straight dial up there. I remember
Yep,
hitting the
I
button
remember
and
that.
say, oh no, I got to pay $10 for the internet. My
We all
mom's
have
gonna
those.
kill
We
me.
all have those horror stories, right, of our parents being like, "Hey, what the heck? What were you doing?"
Exactly. I won't do it again.
Right.
But let me bite these 3 ringtones. But yeah, but I'm just curious, nowadays kids have phones so much earlier. I think they're not only accessible via the phone, but now there's so many different platforms and it's the exposure is so much more widespread. I mean, I've heard stories on all the social media platforms having soft versions of porn and even Substack being sent stuff. So, it's almost at this aggressive level and, I have a son, he's one-ish, and I think it's a ways off. But, I do think in my head, how am I going to have this conversation with him? What do the boundaries look like? What would I do different? And I'm curious if you just have any general thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think having an open environment where they trust that they can come to you and talk about it and uh, not feel like they're just this horrible person. Not to feel, I think shame is really one of the biggest chains that wraps around us and that binds us. It keeps the cycle going, really. And for me, shame was such a huge thing. I often share, I went to Catholic school, kindergarten through seventh grade, and my parents, they were never like really strict Catholic people. I would say my parents have been married now for over 35 years and have a great relationship with them. But I feel like I never really got really impactful sex talk. A little bit of a sex talk, but not really a porn talk, if that makes sense. I was definitely taught like good, healthy things about sex from my parents, especially my dad, but we never really had much of a talk about porn. And I remember when I was in second grade in Catholic school, they were going over cardinal sins. I'm not sure if you're familiar with if you're familiar with Catholic faith, but basically it was like, hey, if you commit these sins, these are really mortal sins, and they can be forgiven, but they're very difficult to be forgiven. And one of them is looking at porn, having sex before marriage, that kind of thing. And I remember when I was 10, that was right around the time of second grade, and that was when I was exposed to porn at a friend's house. And I had this shame, man, like that I was just going to hell. And I think what happens is with kids, to kind of circle back to what you were saying, is if you're a kid and you're 10 and you already feel like you're going to hell and no one's telling you otherwise, then you make this agreement with yourself. Well, hey, I'm already screwed. So why would I deprive myself of this amazing access to porn and just whatever I can find, right? Because there's definitely that pull with the addiction to where there's that chase, that ritual of finding things, of sneaking around, of not getting caught, that kind of thing, but still having the suspense that you might get caught. And I'd say as a kid, I think what would have helped was just have a healthier sense of, hey, this is something that I'm not going, as a parent, I'd say, hey, I mean, when I have a kid, I think I put accountability software on the phone for sure. I think would be a great way to have that accountability right away. But there's always going to be some kind of friend, right, or something that's going to happen to where it's going to be outside your control. So I think if I was talking to a kid or to my kid, I would say, hey, I know that there's going to be a time when you look at this stuff, but it's not going to fill you up. It's actually going to drain you. It's going to take away. And there's going to be long-term impacts down the road. But what I want you to focus on now, hey, let's go fishing. Let's do something outside. Let's fill that tank up, basically. Because that's what I've found in my life and what's helped me in my recovery is you start to fill your tank with things that are positive, that are lasting, that have that fuel source that keep going. Because I think with porn, it's like a hit of like nitrous oxide, and you're like racing down the street and then you're out. Then you need another hit of it, and you got to keep going. And it's just, it leads to this burnout to where, oh my gosh, like my car is totally destroyed now, and I want to keep going fast, but I can't even go fast anymore. So I need to increase my nitrous oxide. I need to increase this fuel. Instead, if you're doing something healthy, right? If you have some kind of passion, some kind of hobby, something that's connected, it starts to just deteriorate that pull. And I really think just as a kid, I think it's ultimately what I found out through therapy was I was trying to fill some unmet needs from my childhood with porn. So I think that's something as a parent that you can start to hopefully uncover through discussion, through openness, just to see and evaluate as a parent yourself. Hey, what kind of needs does my kid need? What can I provide them that can give them that sense of comfort, that sense of love? I love my dad. He struggled with alcohol when I was going into high school and in college and a little bit after college. And it was never abusive. He was just absent. And what I found out through therapy, actually, I did EMDR, which was super helpful for me. Oh my gosh, that was great. Just my therapist brought it up. I had multiple therapists bring it up, but the one that I ended up doing it with, it really helped me big time. Started to unlock memories, things that are important, but really a key thing for me that I found out was my dad was my light bringer. So he was the one that I looked up to the most. My mom was fantastic too, but my dad, he played college basketball, hunting, fishing, just a man's man kind of guy. And I think it was kind of interesting to think back on this. I actually wrote an article about it, but he lost his father when he was going into high school. And I don't know if that had to play. I don't want to psychoanalyze it too much. But I think as I was going into high school, his firstborn son, I think he was struggling with some stuff. I think financially it was a little rocky. I think he was switching jobs, things like that, traveling. And he just went to Jim Beam, I think, just to get away from things. And he was just absent. So I always remembered when I get home from practice or school, I'd want to talk to him, right? Because I was so excited. I wanted to play college basketball like him, and he'd just be slumped on the chair watching TV. And I just knew right away that he was absent. And at the time, I lived in the basement, so I had basically all this to myself. And I just remember it was like a triggering thing for me. Like the minute I'd see him drunk, I'd go downstairs, put my backpack down, go straight to the computer, start looking at porn like right away. It was just like this Pavlov's dog thing. And then when he wasn't drunk, I remember, hey, like we'd talk and, maybe I'd help him out with some chores or something. And that oftentimes would dissuade me from going to this thing because I was getting my needs met. I was getting that attention from him, that love from him, because I think ultimately I felt like, well, you just love the bottle more than you love me. That's how I internalized it, right? And then that went into college. It's just kind of key moments in life, I think. And I think for him, it was just, he probably just felt that anxiety of like, hey, this is an important moment. And then would drink, probably because he was just in a bad spot. But we actually went on this elk hunting trip where I shot my first elk in Colorado, my first bull elk, and it was really cool. He was pretty drunk. We were driving down this blizzard in our ATVs to visit my uncle, who was in his camper like a mile or two down the mountain. And there was something wrong with my ATV. I think it was like the battery connection was off. And at the time, I think I was just getting out of college, so I didn't know much, about fixing things like he did. And he just wasn't really that helpful. And then I eventually found it out how to fix it, right? So we got back to camp, and then the next day I just brought it up to him and I said, hey, Dad, I want to hunt with you until you're 90, till you're 100, as long as possible. And I really respect you when you're sober and you're capable. And hey, I'm relying on you out here. And I want to hunt with you. And I love it when I can. And we're having a good time. But if we keep doing this, if you keep drinking, your health's going to decline. And I'm not going to be able to rely on you if something happens. Because when you're in the mountains of Colorado and during the wintertime, it can get really rough. And if someone's not in the right mental state and their reliability, can really put you in a dangerous situation really fast. And I just remember at that moment, his eyes lit up. He wasn't defensive. He just nodded and was like, okay. And I think I shot my bull it was the next day or two, I shot my elk. And it was a cool moment because he actually watched me run down it was about 1,000 yards, this huge meadow. We saw 2 elk down, and I was just running in the snow, like in deep snow. I was so excited, and I shot it. And I had my knife with me at the time. Actually, I have it in my pocket, which is kind of funny. But I had my buck knife that he gave me, and I wasn't taking great care of it, so it wasn't super sharp. So I was trying to get this elk open, and my dad actually took out some knives that he had already for me when I shot my elk, and he handed them to me. He's like, here you go, son. I have these for you. And it was really, I'm getting goosebumps. Really after that moment, he stopped drinking. He just stopped, and he's been sober now. I think that was in 2018. So he's been sober for 7 years. I guess why I bring that up is because, there can be healing, even if something happens in childhood, which I think happens to a lot of us. There's something, right? There's some kind of trauma that occurs. I know you wrote an article on that, but I think there's something that happens that no matter what it is, it could be little t trauma, big T trauma. There's something that affects us. And then this solution comes in, right? Because I think porn's a solution if you're addicted. Whenever you're addicted to something, it's you're seeing it as a solution, as something that can help, take that pain away. Something that can, I often call it like a numbing solution for me. When I was really just feeling depressed or bored or whatever, it would start to come in. And then as I went through my recovery, and my recovery really started, I would say in 2018 actually, I started to pick up, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on. I'm feeling this pull. I'm feeling this triggering pull that's pulling me back into wanting to consume porn again. And you start to identify it more. And once you start to identify it, then you can say, okay, this need of feeling unwanted or not feeling confident, that's another one for me, is this, if I wasn't feeling confident in myself, that'd be times where I'd go to porn. So you start to identify these things, and then you can start building those things, like whatever those needs are. You can start filling those needs back up. Hey, if it's confidence, start doing things that you can start feeling more confident about. If you're not feeling wanted, hey, maybe it's the relationship you're in. Maybe there's things that need to be worked out there. Or if you're single, maybe there's some things that you can work on in your own life that can be more desirable for somebody else. And then once you start to feel those feelings and your tank's getting full, then porn becomes less attractive. It becomes like, why would I do that? Like, why would I go back to that? I'm already getting my needs met, right? But it takes time. But a little bit of a long answer, father-son story, but I really resonate with that because it was healing for my dad, not just for me too, but my dad. It brought him into sobriety. It was this moment of realization of, yeah, like I want to hunt with my son. I want to be reliable, and I think that's a really it's an important takeaway, hopefully, for people listening if they have kids. I think the kids. I don't have a kid yet, but I'd like to have one someday. They want that love, that attention, and it's not always easy. Obviously, a lot of life happens. But I think what happens is once a father starts to go into an addiction, and it's porn too, and I think that's why it's tough sometimes for this younger generation to get the attention that they need, is likely because their parent, probably their dad, is probably looking at porn too. I mean, it's just the honest truth of it. I think is how are you supposed to feel confident talking to your son about porn if you are struggling with it yourself? And oftentimes, I think when that happens, you start to project on your kid and say, "Hey, that's awful. You should never do that. Terrible thing." And I think that's just gonna push them away and push them towards porn. Because like you said, man, I mean, we had to work for it. I had to work for it back in the day, right? You have the loud dial up internet. You're like waiting to say, okay, is there, no one's gonna sneak up on me, that kind of thing. And you know not really any accountability software out there. And really, I'd say for our parents, they probably weren't really prepared for the kind of porn that we were looking at, right? Because if you look generationally, back when my dad's generation and older, right, it'd be magazines. You'd have to go somewhere to buy it. There would be a stigma attached to that, right? Like if I just drove in my small town to an adult store, someone's going to see me and say, "Hey, Mac was at this adult store." Right? Or, "Hey, I saw Mac at the gas station or at the grocery store picking up, a Playboy or whatever." Like there was that element of, there's like the three A's. I don't know if you ever heard them before with addiction, but it's accessibility, affordability, and anonymity. And normally, if you have the opposite of that, right? Like if it's hard to access, if it's hard to be anonymous, and if there's a cost associated to it, that's a barrier right there, right? So that's a barrier, that's a natural barrier. And that's probably like when I was first exposed to it, there was more of a barrier to get to it, right? But now, I mean, man, it's all three of those. You can be anonymous, right? You can go on dark mode, or what. You're never really fully anonymous, just to be clear. I mean, these porn companies have all of your data and are selling it, so you're not anonymous. Affordability, though, right? It's free. There's definitely a cost associated to it, but it's a hidden cost that's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your identity, because you're always going to be at war with your conscience if you have that value of where inherently hey, I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. I shouldn't be looking at women like they're objects for my sexual satisfaction. I think most of us have that in us. I think it's just human decency. Sure, too, I'm a Christian, so there's that in there too. A lot of Christians struggle with porn big time. Like Sunday night's actually the most trafficked night for porn use. And a lot of Christians struggle with it, which just kind of blows your mind a little bit, right? It's like, wow, on the holy day, on the Lord's day, that's when people are looking at porn the most. But so you have the affordability, right? And then the last one's accessibility. Well, that one's easy, right? Like you could just pull up your phone and boom, it's there, right? Like just go on the screen, bam, look at it within a few seconds, which I think really, if you don't have any strategies in place, if you don't have a support system, if you don't have that healthy role model in your life that can talk to you in an empathetic way, a place of understanding, a place of support, I mean, that one gets really hard for people because, I mean, I struggle just with being on my phone sometimes, right? Like I'm not looking at porn or trigger or edging on that, but I could just be getting dopamine hits from growing my Substack. That's something I'm working on right now is checking notifications. Hey, how many podcast downloads did I get today? And then just scrolling through stuff. Like that's hard on its own. I think a lot of people struggle with that. Is just phone time. But then you add in the extra component of, well, I'm not getting my sexual needs met, or I'm not getting A, B, C, D needs met. And hey, I've been looking at this since 10. It becomes very easy just to get in there, and then it becomes really hard to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, so much good stuff in there, man. And I mean, I'm struck by a few things. The first, that story with your father. I think that's right. Many of us who turn to addiction, it starts because we have some deep wounding. For me, my father passed when I was 11, the trauma of abandonment. And my forms of addiction, I just remember I could never sit in a moment alone because I would be overwhelmed with no one's with me. It's just me. And I'd constantly just be trying to fill my time. And, there's the classic addictions, but then we can have an addictive relationship with so many things. I was always busy just trying to avoid sitting still and be with myself. And I appreciate the 3 A's framework. I think that's really helpful for people understanding. But you reaching a point within you that the cost of not saying something to your dad finally outweighed the cost of saying something. Because a lot of people, and it's the same with getting free of recovery, right? I mean, we all conveniently want to be set free, but that is more conceptually. It's not until we realize, okay, where I'm at and what I'm doing, it's way worse. So this, even though it's going to be a difficult conversation, I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know what lies for me on the other side, or getting free, right? How do I get free? I'm not sure how it's going to happen. I have to tell these people, come clean about this, face these things. You just reach the point, you're like, it doesn't matter, because whatever is on the other side can't be as painful as this. And then to see your dad's eyes, light up, and for him to get it. And in that moment, it's so disarmingly true. It just resonated with them. And you think, well, like, you didn't coerce him, you didn't force him, you didn't nag him, you didn't judge him, you didn't do all the things that we think, well, that's how we do it. We just white knuckle this and then we get better. The fact is, you just expressed the honesty of where you're at and how it was negatively affecting you, and it struck him on a deep fatherly level that caused him to turn around. And for those listening, I encourage you to do the same where you're at in your struggle and your addiction. Just read step 1 of the big book in AA. Just admit that you're powerless. That's the first step, is just coming to terms with where you're at, man. So thank you for sharing all that wisdom. And you mentioned the word recovery a few times. Your personal journey through addiction, relapse, divorce, and healing provides such a powerful and truly human testament. By the way, I think it's very relatable to both the challenges and the possibilities of recovery. You've mentioned that hearing someone discuss porn addiction on a podcast was so transformative for you. So I'm curious, what was it about finding that relatable, resonant content that sparked such significant change in your life?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so that was in 2018. It was really interesting. I wrote a poem about my dog that just turned 16 and all the lessons he taught me. And I was going back to all my photos, and I was actually able to really trace through my photos just when my rock bottom moment was, because I remember I took my dog up to the mountains with me to my grandparents' cabin, and that was like, man, it wasn't that far into our marriage, really. I mean, I don't think we were even a year married yet, and she caught me looking at some stuff, and I was just such a liar about it, even though it was just clear as day, and just gaslit her and everything. And I think she was just like, hey, go get some space and seek some material, that kind of thing. And I didn't even know where to start. I didn't even know, where do I even start with this? And I just remembered I love podcasts. I listen to, gosh, probably listen to like 3 or 4 podcasts a day, man. It's just nuts. Being up here in the mountains too, where I'm at, the service goes. So I'll normally download a few and take my dogs on a long walk. And I've always just loved podcasts. I think that came as kids. We used to listen to audiobooks. My parents had, it was really cool. We had a hallway closet with a cassette tape player. And then we had these wires that went to the boys' room and the girls' room. I have 2 sisters and a little brother. And we just listened to like Frog and Toad and Series of Unfortunate Events, Harry Potter, all this stuff, right? It was so cool. So I think podcasts for me were something that I resonate with. I just always enjoyed listening to something while I'm doing something. So interestingly enough, that's how I started just to look. I just typed in like porn, like quitting porn, that kind of thing, and found this amazing podcast. That's definitely recommended. I mean, it's what got me going, but it's called Porn Free Radio. And Matt, he's been doing the podcast now for over 10 years, I believe. And I remember, I think I listened to about 20 episodes on a 3-day weekend of his. And his first episode was about him being caught. And I think that really resonated with me, right? Because he's a Christian guy, but he doesn't lead with it. I don't really lead with it either, because I really want to just tell my story in a relatable way. I mean, my faith has definitely been a huge part of my recovery, but I think everyone has to find that in their own way, right? But what I liked about him, he's a Christian guy, but he doesn't lead with it. He tells stories, provides really good tips on things. And I think it helped me start to develop a understanding of vocabulary of what this actually is. Because really until 2018, and I was born in 91, from 10 to that stage, I just really didn't think about it in that way. I didn't really think about this as something that I could remove from my life or live without. I always knew growing up that it was a sin as a Christian, and definitely like, hey, I shouldn't be looking at this, but I didn't really think about it anywhere past that. And it became more of an unconscious sometimes thing that I just get pulled to. So I think listening to him, definitely like while I was fly fishing, while I was in the mountains with my dog, it really helped just start me on this road of recovery. And I define recovery really as you're just going in a different path. You're going in a different path, right? Recovery doesn't mean that you're just going to be sober the whole time. I've had relapses throughout recovery, but it means that you have a repentant attitude where you can make amends and then you can get back on the road to where you're heading north. You're not heading south. You're going up. You're elevating your life. You're elevating your trajectory and growing as a person. That's really what I see recovery as, is you're going to this destination to where you can get to a life and really just live your life holistically, to where it just doesn't really have the appeal anymore, whatever that addiction is. Because yeah, there's always going to be temptations, right? There's always going to be things, especially with porn too, right? Like it's everywhere. It's in our culture. I mean, you can't really watch a show anymore on TV that's like been made past a certain year where there's not like an adult show where there's not nudity, sex scenes, all that stuff, right? So it's less about like avoiding porn and more about living a life where you don't need it. So I think that's what really helped me with the podcast was him telling his story, him being honest, which is huge. Because I think with porn addiction, with porn, really, dishonesty is a part of the package. Like you have to keep it secret when you're doing it. And I think that's true for a lot of addictions, right? These are things that you don't want people seeing. You don't want your partner seeing, your spouse, your mom, your dad. You don't want anyone to know about it. And that's what really can keep us trapped. So I think just hearing his story and hearing just what he did to get himself to a place to where he's porn free, I think that's what was really relatable to me.
Yeah. I appreciate you framing it like that. I think that's right. As much as we tout experts and gurus and people that seem to be selling certainty, it is the people that level set and they're real that are more relatable guides that can help us journey, because in them admitting their struggle, what they're saying is, I've actually been where you're at. And I also have been beyond that, and I know how to not stay there. And I think you need both. You need someone that's going to meet you where you're at, but not keep you where you're at. And it sounds like this guy provided not just a resonance, because and this is oftentimes I find that the trouble, and I'm saying this as a therapist, is therapists are really good about acknowledging, oh, that's very difficult. Yeah, you deserve to love yourself, to make sure you're accepting yourself and your circumstances and All that is absolutely valuable. But the change comes though in saying, and you're more than that. You can be more than that, and needing that challenge. And part of it might be because it's a traditionally masculine trait and the field is dominated by women. And this podcast is a good example of a guy who said, I went through it, but I got free of it. So why not give back and help people get out of it too? And I resonate as well. When I hit my low point, 2020, I'd made a major mistake in my relationship with my then girlfriend, now wife. And I just remember not being able to fully tell the truth because my addiction had still had a hold on me. And I found this podcast and this author, William Paul Young. And I'll read this quote if you're open to it. And if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear. They're just similar to how this podcast struck you. And when I heard this guy had an affair with his secretary and then end up repairing his marriage, and they're thriving now, but it took many, many years to do. But so he says, bad theology is like pornography. It's the imagination of a real relationship without the risk of one. It tends to be transactional and propositional rather than relational and mysterious. You don't have to trust capital P person, which I include me as a person and God as a person, or care for person. It becomes an exercise in self gratification that ultimately dehumanizes the self and the community of humanity in order to avoid the painful processes of humbling and trusting.
Damn. That's a really good quote.
I
That
know,
sums
it's a
it up pretty
zinger.
well. Yeah, it's a zinger.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it hits really hard on the fact that it's not just the act of consuming porn as dehumanizing somebody else, right? Because that's an important thing to think about, really, is when we're consuming this, we are engaging in that dehumanization of somebody, right? We're looking at a literal human being that has a soul, probably has a family, and we're just looking at them with our mouths drooling, our pants below our ankles, right? And it's just, hey, I want to be satisfied. And it's not just dehumanizing someone else, but it's actually dehumanizing yourself. You're reducing yourself down to just this object yourself, a consumer of this, but it's actually consuming you as well. But yeah, that's a great quote, really. That resonates with me for sure, because I found that in my relationships, especially my past marriage, I was married for 5 years, I wasn't the man I needed to be. And a lot of that, I think, came from a lack of emotional maturity. And I think that emotional maturity was stunted because of my porn use. Like this quote said, right? We go to this gratification instead of meeting these painful needs. Like what's keeping us in a state of pain, and we go to this to, and we're not solving it really. We think we are in a way because that's just what we've done for so long. But then when you realize this is actually not solving it, this is actually keeping me stuck, I think that's when the transformation can really start to begin, right? It's not going to be easy to start off with. No one said it's going to be easy. Man, it's tough. But once you get over a certain point mentally with your how you think about things, it actually becomes a lot better. It becomes a lot simpler. I still get triggered sometimes. I still get, like I think I was telling you before, so I didn't really sleep that great last night, right? That for me, I know is a thing that puts me in a different state to where, yeah, I'm going to be, if I'm at the grocery store, I'm going to be looking around a little bit more. I'm going to be, yeah, my eyes are going to be going around because I'm tired, right? Like I'm not as strong mentally. But once you start being aware of these things, then you can be like, okay, so what? I'm tired. So what? That doesn't mean I need to go to this. Doesn't mean I have to go back to this thing. I can do it. I can do 1,000. I can do 1,000,000 different things. Then go back to this. But yeah, man, that's it. That's a really good quote. That's a good one.
Thank you, man. And thank you for your thoughts on that. And I appreciate you connecting, triggers and coping skills, which I'd love to hear from you a bit later. And, this reminded me of one more thing is, you were saying in the moment, you feel like it's solving something, but it's really not. And I was struck earlier how you framed this so concisely, but in short, the more meaning you have in your life, then the less meaningless things that you'll do. And where do we get meaning? It's responsibility. It's saying, okay, even leisurely activities, how can I be responsible for those? But it's in my job, how can I be more responsible? Working towards mature relationships that lead to long-term committed, marriage, trying to have kids. These are all things that porn attacks and that modern society is attacking because we want to say, well, I want it my way. I want it now. I want the immediate gratification and freedom. I don't want to be bogged down. The world's such a terrible place. Why would I invite someone into this? I don't want to be bound by the commitment of this relationship, and everything is just screaming non-commitment, irresponsibility, and really it's a fake sense of freedom. And I like that quote. I'm sure you've heard it, but it says recovery delivers on what addiction promises. And there's such a true principle in there, is that in the moment, the addiction makes you feel like you're going to be promised the world. You'll get all this stuff. I'm going to feel so good. I'm going to be so gratified. I'm going to feel so free. I get to do what I want, right? And yet the actual recovering is the ability to actually receive the trust that's given. And you mentioned your marriage. You have such a unique experience of journeying through this recovery through these two relationships. And the conversation around pornography with intimate partners can be incredibly challenging. You have two very contrasting experiences. The first being discovered by your ex-wife versus you proactively discussing your struggles with your current girlfriend. So how did these different approaches impact your relationships? And what have you learned about the power of transparency and vulnerability?
I'm just going through that past marriage. I look back and there's definitely some really good times, right? Luckily, it was an amicable divorce. Still consider ourselves as people that respect each other and that are friends, want the best for each other. But what I really saw and what I talk about a lot and why I talk about it is, from that moment, about 6 months into the marriage of discovery, that really changed the trajectory of our trust. It really, because in a relationship, right, trust is like the foundation of it. You can't really love someone. It's harder to love someone unconditionally if you don't trust them. It's harder to have intimacy, to have sex, to have a full bedroom when you don't trust somebody. And it's harder to, I think, just get through life in general in a marriage when there's that broken trust. And what I learned too, I think, with women is I think healing is a lot less linear than we might think. It took a really long time for her to get to some places, right, with her healing. And then I'd have another time where I'd relapse and I'd lie about it. Over time, that's what really I think was the death nail, was just, hey, things are going well, but then, hey, I relapse. And I had some relapses where I was honest about it and proactive, and that was definitely better. But then the last relapse I had really in our relationship, I just hit it, and it came up later after an international bachelor party I was telling you about, where I was definitely the only married guy there, not in a good situation. I didn't physically cheat on her, but I was not in a good spot, not just surrounded by women of the night, so to speak, trying to keep people out of trouble. And I put myself in a really bad position. And I think at the time, I think I told you, we moved to a new place. We were in Denver area in Colorado, moved to Colorado Springs. And at the time, I was seeing a sexual therapist, Christian based. We were about to do EMDR actually before I moved. And who knows what would have changed if I would have gone through that and stayed more connected and got connected with a different church, because I moved away from my church, my men's group, all that stuff. So I basically moved away from the things that were working for me. And kind of like the marriage too, I think people have this false dichotomy that, hey, if I get married, it's going to fix things. Definitely not. Or if I'm going to have a kid, yeah, I'm going to stop looking at porn. Definitely not. You still got to put in the work. You still got to have community, connection, have purpose, right? So I just bring that up to say, yeah, so I had this relapse. It was actually interesting. In 2021 was initially when I created my Substack. It was initially when I was going to podcast. I literally had everything created, had an article I wrote. I think we just watched the show Chernobyl, which is a pretty good show on HBO. And a lot of parallels, right, between lying, right, because basically the Russian government just tried to cover it up, that this nuclear plant totally just went off the rails, right? And because of that cover up, the devastation grew because nobody knew about it. So then they had to evacuate cities. A bunch of people died. It was like this global event. I think they actually had nuclear particles that were like in the air, like going into different countries. So it started to, I wrote something about it. I need to write something about it again, because it really, I think there's a lot of relatability to having like a hidden addiction that you're hiding, and how it can be really radioactive, because it's invisible, this nuclear radioactive, it's an invisible thing that can kill you and can kill, in porn's case, can kill a relationship or your sense of identity. But basically, getting back to it, I was going to start, and then just wasn't confident enough. I think I started just to get into a negative mental state. I wasn't that close to God at the moment. So then I had this relapse. I think I was like 2 years sober at the time, right? I was doing really well. And then I had this relapse that snuck up on me because I wasn't doing the proper things to catch it. And then I just remember telling myself, I said, hey, I'm just gonna bury this. I'm not gonna tell anyone about it. No one needs to know except for me and God. I'm never gonna talk about it again in my life. And I'm gonna be sober, all the things, right? It probably sounds really relatable to people. Is I'm gonna bury this. Go on this bachelor party, come back, and it was just a mess, man. Like, she started to talk to me about the trip, and then I talked to her, eventually came out about the relapse. And I think that to her was just really painful because we were really healing at the time. And then that happened. And yeah, man, I'll just share. I mean, I called the hotline, I think the next day. I've never felt that way before, but I called the hotline because I just felt completely lost. Like, because I knew at that point that we're likely this marriage might not make it, because she brought up the D word. And when that comes up in a relationship when you're married, I mean, it's like a cancer, man. It just keeps growing, when that word is actually shared with intention. And yeah, man, I called the hotline, and I just remember I was just completely broken, and I was just yelling, like, what does it matter? Basically, what does it matter? And in that moment, I just remember praying to God just to save me. And like you talked about, man, step one of the big book, that was a powerless moment. It's like the one time in my life. I mean, I had some after that because started like go through all the difficult things. But really that was like the lowest moment of my life, and the moment where I completely released myself of any kind of pride, was completely humble, and came before Christ and said, please save me, save me. And I just remembered the visual in my mind was I was drowning in a river, roaring river, and Christ is that boulder. And I hit the boulder, and if you're in a roaring river, you hit a boulder, it's not going to feel great. It's going to knock the air out of you. It's going to hurt, but you're alive. And at that sense, in that moment of time, I was like, I am alive and I want to live. I want to live no matter what, no matter if there's a divorce, no matter if I lose everything, I want to be alive. I want to glorify God in whatever way I can. I want to rebuild myself. And, yeah, that was when I got in touch with the therapist I still have today. Great guy. And we tried doing couples counseling. Gosh, man, I remember these moments sometimes with my ex, and just completely heartbreaking, man. Just because, I mean, we were really open with each other, and she let me know how it hurt her, and she didn't hold back, and I don't blame her for that at all. She was completely justified, but it was tough. It was tough to see that, and to see and witness the devastation that was caused, right? Like, she didn't ask for this, and I didn't really ask for it too, when I was a kid, but I wish I could have caught on to it earlier. And I mean, that's a big part of why I do what I do, is I just hope I can spark something in someone's mind to be like, hey, man, I can think about this differently. Man, go seek help. So anyways, yeah, that relationship, right, of not being honest about it ended my marriage, right? Like, it just got beyond a point of saving. And even though it was an amicable divorce, man, like, it was so hard. I mean, my heart goes out to anyone that goes through a divorce, because I know a lot more divorces weren't as amicable. Like, we didn't get any lawyers or anything, and we were able to settle amicably and stuff. So anyways, that's the one side of the spectrum, right? And so after divorce, I got my RV. Basically, like, right when the papers finalized, I bought an RV and started to chart out a plan to travel the country. Took this thing all the way from Colorado to the Florida Keys, where I met up my best friends, where we go fishing like every year, at least once a year in Florida. Got a buddy down there that he's a great fisherman, knows how to boat. He's got his license and everything. And this is great. So I was in the Florida Keys for 2 weeks, saw a bunch of family along the way, people I haven't seen forever. It was really healing, man. And then I also would pop into bars sometimes and just talk to people. And, I'm a pretty outgoing guy. So I feel like I was starting to fill my tank up with just things that fill me up, right? Like people, talking, stories, adventure, fishing, all this stuff. So I get back to Colorado, and I think I started to talk to my brother. So my brother and I have been accountability partners for 2 years, which is so cool. And so we talk every day, basically. We send each other voice memos, and respond to each other. We do like a fast check-in, which we could talk about later, but basically a check-in every day where we're checking in with each other. And I remember telling him as I was traveling, I'm like, hey, I'm kind of lonely, Like I remember this one Vietnam vet I talked to in the Florida Keys he's like, wouldn't it be better if you were doing this with somebody else? And I think at the time I was like, yeah, but I'm seeing friends, I'm seeing people. I wasn't just lonely the whole time. Like I was able to see people as I was stopping different places, which was a blessing. But I always remember that because I was like, yeah, like it would be nice to have somebody else. And when I got back to Colorado, I think I just started to go like online dating apps just to test out the market. That's a weird way of saying it, but you know what I mean. Like getting back, it was so weird, dude. Being in a relationship with a woman for 10 years, and I'm 33. That's like a 30-year life. So that was pretty eye opening. Like jumping back into the dating pool. Basically, I went on 2 dates that didn't work out, and then my third date was Cassie, who's my girlfriend now. She's phenomenal, just amazing person, so blessed. But yeah, man, I think it was like our fourth date. So our fourth date, we went salsa dancing. She loves to dance, so we went salsa dancing. It was actually in the basement of like this Masonic lodge. It was funny. It was so funny. I think I showed up a little bit early before her, and everyone had a couple, so I was kind of like watching, just to see how to do everything. She showed up, man, and one thing I love about Cassie, man, is she respects me, and she loves it when I'm a man. She really respects it, and it gives me that confidence. So I remember, man, I danced pretty well that night, salsa dancing. We had a great time, and had some really good dates before that, right? And yeah, I think I just thought about it. We were in the car talking. I mean, I love just long talks in the car. It's kind of nostalgic, of being younger, just sitting in a car talking, listening to music and stuff. And I just remember we were talking, and I just knew in my mind, I think before the date happened, I had it in my mind to bring it up. Because obviously she's going to ask, hey, like, why did you get divorced, right? Like, obviously that's an important thing to talk about, especially for me. I'm dating for marriage. I'm not just dating to date. Like I want to get married again, right? And I just knew it'd be an important thing to talk about. So we were talking, and I said, hey, I just wanted to bring up the reason why I got divorced. And I told her my story. I told her basically everything I told you now, more details there too. And then this is the important thing. It wasn't just being vulnerable and sharing that, but it was actually telling her, hey, what am I doing about it? What actions am I putting in place? And that's when I told her about, yeah, I've been doing a podcast for a bit. I've been writing about it, do daily accountability with my little brother. I'm really passionate about this because of the pain that I went through, that my ex went through. If there's anything I can do to help somebody that's in that spot, or even be proactive about it, that seems to me like one of my biggest purposes in my life, is to help people with that. Because I just know that I went through some pretty significant pain, and I know that people are probably going to experience a significant amount more, potentially, depending on what relationship they're in. And I feel like I was able to get out of it decently, to where I was still able to keep my mental health and financially be okay. But I know that's not going to happen for everybody. So if there's a way that I can meet somebody at that spot through my writing or through poetry or through my podcast, I'm going to do it. So yeah, I told her about this, and I mean, she opened up and said, yeah, like my ex actually, he struggled with porn. And I mean, it was like the hand of God was on us, really, just talking, because it's like we were both in our relationship have been able to heal each other, which has been so cool, because I've been able to meet the needs that her past partner wasn't, and vice versa with her, with me, because being able to be proactive about it, being able to be honest about it, that for me, it helps set the stage for our relationship. Because if I can be honest about like my most vulnerable thing, right, that can open the door for her to be honest about her vulnerabilities. And when you're honest like that, then it's like you can have conversations where you're not projecting. So I think that's what happens a lot of times, is when we have something that we're not telling someone about, oftentimes we're going to project on them something in a way to kind of make ourselves feel better. I think it's a natural thing. I literally think in school, like when kids are young, they should be taught on how to like talk to people, how to apologize, how to be empathetic, because definitely I was really lacking that skill. But the interesting thing about it, man, actually, is that I had a relapse it was like about a few days before I actually went on my first date with her, because I was doing well with my sobriety. I was traveling, but then I got back to Colorado, camped at my parents' house for a bit. And what's really interesting was, I think at the time with the RV, I think I had to winterize it. So then I was sleeping in my old bedroom. And what's really interesting about that is that room is like where where my addiction really started was down there. And my last relapse I had was that time. And what happened was it was right around what would have been our sixth wedding anniversary. And it was the day after Thanksgiving. And what's crazy about it was I was doing well, but I think I stopped traveling. I was kind of in this weird space where I was like, okay, what do I do next with my life? Kind of thing. So my routine was kind of jumbled. And it was the day after Thanksgiving. My uncle had this like leftovers Thanksgiving kind of thing. And I just drank so much. That's another thing. I've been sober from alcohol for almost half a year now. Been walking that with my little sister, which she's been sober. She started a month after me, but she's doing really well, which is cool. But I think alcohol definitely, the times where I have relapse, oftentimes alcohol was a factor. And I was so depressed thinking about this. I was so stuck on just like this loss at that point in time. And I just remember I drank so much. I was so hungover. And then eventually, yeah, I just slipped back into porn. But that was about a few days, like I said, before I first met Cassie. And that was also something I told her on our date was like, hey, I had this relapse and here's what I'm doing about it. And yeah, the relationship's been porn free since. And yeah, I just proactively check in with her. Oftentimes it's like, hey, I just told my brother about this today and here's what I'm doing about it kind of thing. But yeah, man, just starting at it. And I know that doesn't happen with everybody for sure. Probably a high percentage of the population listening it might be, hey, you're already in a relationship or you already had a moment where there was discovery or there was a lie and you have to rebuild it. But you can definitely get back to that place of healing. It's just making sure that you have proper communication and expectations, accountability. Those are really important to have. But yeah, man, I would say it's a night and day difference. My past relationship, the one I'm in now, because I think another thing is when you're honest with the person you're with, they're going to respect you a lot more. And when they respect you, they're going to treat you well and you're going to feel good. You're going to feel confident. I mean, gosh, I feel so confident with how I feel as a man because of the relationship that I'm in right now. Like it's so night and day different. Like it surprises me sometimes. I'm like, oh wow, wow, okay, like cool. You respect me. That's great. Because there's a point in time my ex is like she's like I really don't like respect you. Like where are your values at, right? And just to be in a place now where I've got some really good sobriety under my belt and staying active, that's been really helpful for me, is staying active with my publication, my podcast. That's been helpful. But yeah, if anyone's interested, it's episode 9 was the podcast I did after my relapse, and I talked about how I wanted to quit. I did, because literally, dude, I was writing and I actually took a break, and that's probably why the relapse happened, was because I took a break. That was right when I got back to Colorado, got settled, and fell out of my rhythm, because I had a rhythm to life when I was traveling where I was like, okay, I'm going to write on this day, this day, this day. Then I get back, I'm seeing like hometown friends, family. And then I'm in this weird space where I'm like, okay, I'm going to start dating again. And it just threw me off, I think. But yeah, man, night and day difference. Because I think when a woman feels that level of trust and security, you really get to see the beautiful, powerful femininity that is just something to behold, man. When you see that, when your woman trusts you and she's secure with you and she opens herself up to you, man, it's the best. It's the best. I think it's kind of like what we try to substitute when we're looking at porn, right? Is this feeling of like, hey, she's totally into me and all that. But you really get that when you're in a trusting relationship, in a relationship to where, hey, you're being a man of integrity, of honor. That's really the real deal right there. And it's sustainable, right? It's fun. It's engaging. I think sometimes people that are like, oh, you're porn free, you're boring. Like, no, not at all. The opposite, man. Like you get to be in the present and you're not holding things back to where, because I think when you relapse, you're looking at porn, the clock starts ticking on where you start to have all this stress of like, okay, when am I going to tell her? When am I going to tell my accountability partner? What am I going to do differently? It's all these questions that you don't really have an answer to. But at some point, right, you have to tell the truth or be discovered. And it's better to tell the truth. So I think that's my advice for people. You're struggling, is just, find a healthy way, a positive way that you can bring it up and talk about it, to where you have some plans in place for what you're going to do. Because if you're just trying to white knuckle it, which basically just means you're just trying to do it on your own, not going to work. It might work for a little bit, because I definitely had periods of my life where I'd be sober for a bit. But if you don't have a strategy in place or a shifted identity, when you know that, hey, regardless of what temptations I'm going to face, I'm going to get through it. And if I do have a relapse, I'm going to be accountable. I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to get back on again. Because every relapse, really, you learn something. You should learn something. You should be able to learn from it and be like, okay, this is what happened. Trace it back. Because sometimes people will say, oh, yeah, it just came out of nowhere. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's because you weren't really thinking about all the little things. Because there's no relapse that just comes out of nowhere. I hate to break it to anybody. Like, it's a series of events, a series of little tiny events that lead up to that moment. So hopefully that answered your question. But no, things are great, man. I'm so happy. I'm blessed. I'm really, truly blessed.
For sure. It's cool to observe the maturity arc you went on from your previous relationship of more reactive, hiding, secrecy, being defensive, not admitting, not having humility, disconnecting from community and God, to road trip, which I don't want to call it like a rite of passage, but you use this phrase, burning the boats. It's kind of like that, getting out of that mediocrity and just plateauing and staying where you're at. And it's this weird liminal space we can often go through, which is, okay, the pain from my past has shown me I never want to go back there. But the in between you mentioned, after the road trip, being back in Colorado, is the transition into what could be. Well, now this is the affirmative. This is the life I want to live. If we're talking about the hero's journey, it goes from the known, then you go through that unknown, the traveling, the rite of passage back to the known. And that transition can be tough because it's almost easier to engage in the rock bottom and the really high highs. But when you're not in either, and there's not a lot of stability to hold on to. But it really felt like your ability to travel, to do activities like fishing, visiting friends and family, hadn't seen all that. And we talked about earlier, replacing the more meaningless and irresponsible activities with the meaningful and responsible activities, and getting out of that needless suffering. Like you're saying, it's not doing you any good. As hard and insufferable as it is to come clean, to be honest, that is a lot less costly than staying where you're at. So, man, I just appreciate you sharing your story. And now, as we land the plane here to bring some practical guidance, how have you learned to identify triggers and develop effective coping skills? Can you share how introducing conscious decision making and awareness that the issue is often something else entirely, like how a fight with your girlfriend leads to stress or not getting enough sleep, has changed your approach to recovery?
Yeah, so I'd really say it really has cemented in my life. This ability to catch things really has come from. I was telling you about that Porn Free Radio. He had these groups that I started to join, started to learn some strategies, and then the guy that I'm working with now, he's my mentor, my coach, Vern Tomke. He has another great podcast called Finding Traction, and Pastors on Porn. He's actually a pastor as well. I've been working with him now for like 6 years. But a big part of when we do our recovery check-ins, which in group, I do those every Thursday night. Like I'm still in a recovery group. Like I'm still walking that walk too. It helps keep me accountable. But I would say with my little brother, we do these daily check-ins I was talking about. We follow this strategy called the FAST technique. And I think it was initially created for sex addicts. But basically each letter stands for something. So I'll just lay it out real quick and I'll explain it. But basically, FAST means your feelings, your activities in recovery, your sobriety or slips, the threats to your sobriety, and then your tools to combat the threats, basically. So that's what my brother and I do every day. We do a FAST check-in. So basically, you start off with how are you feeling, which can help really identify what's going on. So if I'm feeling tired, okay, well, that's because A, B, and C from the previous night. Maybe I was on my phone too much. Or maybe it was just a really busy day. For me, oftentimes lately, it's just because I've been traveling and I'm trying to fit everything into just doing my newsletter and podcast, all this stuff, trying to fit it all in and then get to my next spot. Typically, it has landed me with some late nights. I will say today, did my traveling earlier today, so now I don't have to stay up super late. So that's one way with what you're saying that I'm seeing the trigger. Like, hey, you didn't get a lot of sleep. Okay, well, today, here's what I did about it. So that's just feelings right there. So that's really, I think feelings is a good way to identify triggers, but we'll get into threats later. But activities and recovery. So we talk a lot about there's like 4 pillars basically of activities and recovery. So you've got your spiritual health, you've got your physical health, you've got your relational health, and then you have your passions. So whenever we check in every day, we're checking in on, okay, like, what did I do for my physical health today? What did I do? How's my relationship going with Cassie? How are my relationships going with my friends? That kind of thing. Like, are there events that happen that would positively affect that, negatively affect that? Then you've got your spiritual health, right? So for me, I'm a Christian. So how am I doing with Jesus? Am I praying? Am I going to church? Am I doing those things? And then passions is like, what is that thing that you're passionate about? For me, really, it's podcasting, writing, all that, or fishing, right? And those are really, I think, important components to focus on a daily basis, right? Are those 4 activities in recovery. Then you've got your sobriety, your slips. Typically what we do is we do like a stoplight kind of. So you've got green, yellow, red. Green's basically you're doing well. Yellow is, hey, I'm not in the green. There's some edging activity. Or I would say yellow for me would be like, hey, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Hey, in public, I'm just trying to check out chicks, that kind of thing. So that'd be more like you're edging into like, hey, caution, caution, caution. So to what you said, I think if I'm in the green, I'm still watchful for things, right? But if I'm in the yellow like multiple days, that's where the alarm's going off. Because that means I'm staying there. There's something that's triggering me. I'm staying there. And hey, am I edging towards a red? And then red would be relapse. So for me, that's porn, that's masturbation. That's like a red for me. And then you go to threats. So then that's where you can weave in, okay, well, what's threatening my sobriety? So those would be the triggers, picking those up. And I'd say when you're in recovery, I think you just start to pick up triggers more. Like triggers are just things like stimuli that would cause that response. And there's a great Viktor Frankl quote. It's like the freedom lies between the stimulus and the response, basically. And in that space that's created, that's where the freedom is, right? And I think identifying the triggers, identifying the threats, you start to create space. And accountability because you're sharing these things. I had a situation that happened that I actually wrote about, podcasted about, that was like 2 weeks ago, but literally in a Walmart parking lot. Okay. Parked just to get some additional things. I was on the phone with Cassie actually, and I hear some like giggling, some like college age girls. Like, I look over and they look attractive. And then there was something in my mom, like that was weird. Like, what was that? And I looked back and like one of them, like her back was facing me. She didn't have any pants on. I was like, what? Like, huh? And the porn mind is like, bro, like this is a gift. Like, hey, you weren't looking at porn, whatever. But that would, for me, I would share that would be a threat to sobriety, right? So I was on the phone with my girlfriend. I said, hey, you're not going to believe this. I told her about it. And I said, hey, just to let you know, like that is a little triggering for me. But we laughed about it, said, hey, I'm not going to go look at porn, but I just want to let you know, like that was just something out of the blue. And then later that night, because at nights, typically when I struggle with porn, I already did a check-in with my brother earlier that day. But when we have these moments, my brother and I, we'll send each other however many we need. I mean, we've FaceTimed each other at times. Like we've had red alert times where I'll just FaceTime him or he'll FaceTime me and be like, hey, bro, let's get out of this situation. I mean, this might be kind of gross, but we at times have sent each other like pieces of like photos of poop, let's just say, or something really disgusting. That's like when I'm like, bro, I'm hammering him. I'm like hammering at the most disgusting images because I'm like, I need to kill that, whatever that temptation is. I want to kill it. That's kind of a funny joke that we have. We haven't done that in a while, which has been nice, but that's like the nuclear option, right? Is to nuke somebody with some nukes. But hey, you don't have to do that. It's not written down anywhere scientifically, but that's what we do. So anyways, that's just an example of I noticed a trigger and I knew how that could affect me if I didn't tell anyone about it, but then I did. And then the power of it like went away. I remember I was telling my brother, I was like, what am I going to do with this information? That's what I kept saying. I was like, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to like go like masturbate now because I just saw some random person? No, I don't need to do that. And it's like reclaims the power like when you find these triggers, because that's the next thing is tools, right? So like what tools am I going to use? So for me, I use the tool of checking in. But it also could be like putting your phone in a different room. I've done that a lot. I'm starting to do that now just because I feel like I'm on my phone a lot and I don't want to be because I want to get better sleep right at night. So what I've been doing is just putting my phone in the dining room and then just playing a podcast or a book on tape or something at night. So yeah, that's really, hopefully that helped answer it, but that's really a strategy that I use on a daily basis. I think it works great. And as long as you're doing it with somebody, I think that's also walking the path with intention, right? Because that's a big thing with accountability partners. And I do see this sometimes where people will just be like, oh, I tried it. I tried recovery. It didn't really work for me. Well, it's probably because you were Maybe you weren't a great accountability partner. Maybe the other person wasn't, right? And I think sometimes people will just give up on it because like, oh well, I tried, but it's like, did you actually try? Like, did you actually go through the steps consistently? But yeah, I think that stuff has allowed me to have more of a second nature for when I do see things. It helps me. I do reflect on past moments too, of like past moments where I did relapse because of something, and it helps me because I go back in those memories. And I'm like, man, like, I'm not going to do that again, you know? I did that one time on a vacation with my ex-wife. There was some hot chick running on the beach with like a thong basically on, and that triggered in me. Like I was in the bathroom, like masturbating to porn, and my ex was in another room. We had this great vacation. Like it was a lot of fun. But then when the truth came out later, it like ruined the whole memory. Just sour like that. It's like, okay, well, we were intimate, but you were intimate with me after watching porn, and you never told me. And yeah, I don't want to live through that. I don't want that to be my story or Cassie's story. And it doesn't have to be. It's well within our control to do so. But like you're talking about, I think it is having that awareness. And as you go into recovery, you'll start to be more aware of it. I mean, you'll pick up on the smallest little things, and it's important to do so.
Yeah, I appreciate that framework, man. It's so practical, so simple, so sustainable, something you can do every day. There's other tips and tricks, but I think that's a good place to start. Just find somebody you can reach out to. So many men are isolated and lonely. Just find somebody. I mean, there's got to be someone in your life that you trust enough, or if there's not, let that be incentive to find that person you can and use the framework, try it out. I love the nuke, by the way. I agree with that actually. I think it's interesting. Most of our neurons are visual. Most of our sensory neurons are visual, and especially men. By the way, we are, and it's interesting to see the studies, right? Because men so much driven by visual sexual explicit content. Women literature. For them, it's the imagination, it's the story, it's the embodiment of that. So I think switching it up to have a visual that, even though we're all little middle school boys at heart, we still don't find fully appealing as a form of entertainment. I think that's actually brilliant, man. And yeah, just appreciate you sharing the tips and tricks and wisdom. So where can people find your work and what you're up to?
So Porn Free Millennial on Substack. I do have a YouTube channel as well that I'm growing, and that's where I'll put typically full podcast video, and then I'll do clips, I'll do shorts, little bite-sized things that people can take away. But really, Substack, I love to write. I do a Monday newsletter where basically I will have a theme that I'll write on, and then I'll also include people in the community, and I will put out like a guest article, something that's applicable. And the cool thing about it, really, if someone's reading my work, it's not all about porn. It's about so much more. I think it's about living a fulfilled life, living a life where you're not living a double life. You're living an undivided life. And so I do talk about porn, but it's not all about that. It's about changing perspectives on how we can look at life differently, how we can live life differently. I typically write poetry as well. I try to write one poem a week if I can. And then on Fridays, I got this 52 Weeks of Freedom series. So the whole goal of that is to get to 52 weeks. So that'd be another, year of sobriety for me, as well as people walking it with me. So each week focuses on something. In my newsletter and in this Friday post, I do challenges too for people, where whatever the theme is, I'll work to break that down and to say, hey, here's your challenge, Monday through Friday, here you go. And then Friday through the weekend leading up to Monday, here's something you can focus on. But yeah, besides that, I'm on Apple and Spotify as well. If you're more of an audio person, I do coaching as well. I do a 30-minute free consultation. Typically, when people work with me, like I have a built-out framework that if you want to use it, we can do different topics. But a big part of it too, for every check-in, every call, is the fast because I think it works. So that's a big part of what I do because I think it really helps build a relationship between the two people, and it also helps you start to like think about things differently, start to uncover things. And that's really the coolest part about recovery, man, is you start to learn more about yourself. Things that you're repressing, things that you're hiding from, escaping. You can meet them. You can meet them head on and say, hey, I'm going to work on this. I'm going to become a better person. And then, yeah, besides that, I'm working on an e-course, like a mini course right now, hoping to get that out by, I'd say, July. But part of it will be a community as well. So when you join the e-course, you also join a community of people. So that's something I've always wanted to work on.
Absolutely, brother. Well, love the work you're doing in the world. It's much needed, and just appreciate your story. And similar to that podcast you found, you went through your own journey, but you decided not to stay there. You decided to become more, and not just become more, but share that more with others in a way where they can do the same. So we'll make sure to put all those resources minus the nuke in the show notes.
Yeah, we don't want that.
And just appreciate, yeah, your wisdom, your vulnerability, your transparency, your guidance. And it was also helpful, brother. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, much love, everybody. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you, Wes.
That's right. Absolutely.